The Life of Napoleon by William Hazlitt, Volume 4, performed by Robert Bethune. A note to the listener. William Hazlitt numbered his chapters continuously throughout the 6-volume work. Therefore the previous volume, Volume 3, ended with Chapter 34, and this volume, Volume 4, begins with Chapter 35. The Life of Napoleon, Chapter 35, The Battle of Austerlitz. Towards the end of 1804, a memorial by one of the Austrian ministers roused Mr. Pitt from the state of inaction in which he had so long remained supine, but writhing under the sense of disappointment, to dream once more of coalitions which had hitherto been and were still to be formed during his lifetime, only to be broken in pieces again. Marengo had staggered. Austerlitz gave the finishing blow to the schemes of pride and arrogance which filled up the whole measure of his perverted capacity. In the month of January, 1805, he gave orders to the English legation to feel the pulse of the cabinet of St. Petersburg, and on the 11th of April following, the treaty of concert was signed between England, Austria, and Russia, the two latter powers engaging to bring large armies into the field, while England was to furnish proportionable subsidies in prosecution of the old nefarious object. Austria, being the nearest, was in the field first, and commenced operations according to the legitimate privilege by an attack on Bavaria, a neutral power, in order to force her into the coalition. But the tide of war soon turned, and Bavaria became the ally of France. In the June of the same year, Baron Vincent, the Austrian general, had gone out of his way to visit Napoleon at Verona, and had paid him sovereign honours by a salute of artillery. No declaration of war was issued, and Count Cobentzel, the Austrian plenipotentiary, still remained at Paris, so that everything concurred to lull Bonaparte into a false security. But a spark was sufficient to rouse him into action, and the thunderbolt fell on those who thought to take him by surprise. He was so little apprehensive on the subject at first, that he would not for some time credit the rumours of a rupture with Austria, and sent Savary to Frankfurt-on-the-Main to learn the truth of the matter, and to buy the best maps of the German Empire. Certain news, however, soon came of the advance of General Mack upon Munich, and of the arrival of the Russians in the Austrian territory. The Emperor now lost no time in raising the camp at Boulogne, and in pushing the troops forward by the shortest routes to the banks of the Rhine, so that they might arrive there by the time that the Austrian army reached the Danube. General Marmont received orders to make the best of his way from Holland. Bernadotte, who was in Hanover, had to cross part of the territory of Prussia, with whom France was at peace, and the sovereigns of the two countries had only lately exchanged honorary distinctions. At the same time, therefore, that the Emperor sent Bernadotte orders to march, he dispatched the Grand Marshal Duroc to Berlin to apprise the King of Prussia of the critical situation in which he was placed by an attack without any previous declaration of war, to express his extreme regret at being obliged on the sudden to march his troops over certain portions of the Prussian dominions, and to excuse himself on the ground of absolute necessity alone. Duroc's reception was not so cordial as it had been on a former occasion. The king said little, digested the affront inwardly as well as he could, but long after his chagrin broke out on more than one occasion, when he could only resort to complaints, saying to Napoleon, "But why did you violate my neutrality of Anspach and Bayreuth?" Baron Hardenberg spoke out more plainly in an official note on the subject, and there is little doubt that a war would have been the result, had it not been for the Battle of Austerlitz. Prussia had just about the same time refused a passage through Polish Prussia to the Russian army, which was, however, consented to in consequence of the dissatisfaction of the court with Bernadotte's movement, and the Emperor Alexander soon after came to Berlin under pretence of a visit to his sister, the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?